Come on, we got to get some energy going. We've only. I'm your third to last speaker, and so you got to get to that finish line. So I'm going to be. I have 60 slides in less than 20 minutes. So you better pay attention, because I use 6-point font, and I will expect you to read everything. No, just kidding. There's a lot of pictures. So my talk is about open algorithms in law. I could have talked about a lot of different things in the open access space, because CALI's doing lots of stuff there. If you don't know what CALI is, admit it right now. I don't know what CALI is. About half the room, a little bit more. Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction, been around for 33 years, incorporated in 1982. We are a nonprofit consortium of law schools. So about 209 of the 211 or 212 law schools are members. They pay us money every year, and we go do cool technology, including UNT, and we go do cool technology projects in ed tech, open access, teaching, administrative computing, all sorts of things. And I'm going to actually talk about one of our coolest projects a little bit later. So there's only 7 of us at CALI. We're small, but we're very nimble. I'm the one in the hat there, in case you couldn't tell. Of particular interest to what Kevin was just talking about, we publish open access casebooks. I actually pay faculty a lot of money to write casebooks, and then I give them away for free under a Creative Commons license. The traditional publishers hate my guts, but I'm not doing it because casebooks cost $200, although that's a really good reason to do it. I'm doing it because I believe in the future all educational materials have to be electronic and as remixable as possible because of the nature of how learning is happening. People need to construct their own learning environments, including the teachers and the students, and so they need the low threshold of not having to worry about the intellectual property issues of their materials. But enough about that. I wanted to start with some context, and the context is this. Open access to the law is really important, and you're like, well, yeah, John, we're at an open access conference. But I want to say it's really important, and I'm going to tell you why. I might even scare you a bit, I hope. So there's a couple of reports out there, one by the Legal Services Corporation and one done by the New York Housing Court, and basically they tell a scary story. First statistic, 50% of the people who walk in the door at legal aid are turned away because there aren't enough legal aid attorneys. And those are the people that are eligible. 50%, you have to go away, right? 80% of the people who probably have a legal problem and can't afford a lawyer, in other words, they may either be poor or they're of modest means, so everybody in this room, because none of you make $190,000 or $200,000 a year. Well, I better not say that. Can't afford a lawyer, and so represent yourself in court as a pro se, and that's what that second result came, is that there's an awful lot of people who can't afford lawyers and so are not getting sufficient representation or access to justice. It's a huge problem. I was just at 3 different conferences about 2 weeks ago at Stanford, the clinical folks, and the Equal Justice Conference, and everybody in the industry, judges, the publishers, the schools, lawyers, they all know that this is a big problem, and as a result there's huge amounts of pressure to change or to do something about this, right? Bad problems are opportunity in this day and age to venture capitalists. So here's my hypothesis. An increasing amount of interaction with legal services, lawyers, courts, government, will involve automated systems. You should all go, duh, right? Actually, this is the real answer. All interaction with services, lawyers, courts, governments, will involve some sort of automated systems. What do I mean? I mean at least decision trees. And maybe, I'm not a big proponent of expert systems and artificial intelligence, but it will look like that to you because it will be magic, or it will look like that to us. In other words, we'll give it its information, it will give us an answer or something that helps us along the path of resolving or dealing with the legal problem. So what about some examples? So that's what this means. Law is going to be instantiated into software code, hopefully by lawyers or other subject matter experts. In other words, open access to the law, which is what we're talking about, is just the beginning. right? It's just the ore that's going to be refined into something else, a system or multiple systems that are going to actually give us answers or guidance in resolving or dealing with our legal problems. So for example, TurboTax, right? It's probably the most common example here. How many of you didn't use something like TurboTax or TaxSlayer, TaxAct, or H&R Block to do your taxes this year? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 10%, 15%. All right, what the heck is your problem? Oh, you must have had such simple taxes, right? You did the 1040EZ. Yeah. That's fine, that's fine. But this is law inside of software, right? It's matter of fact, it's giving you guidance, it's giving you heuristics. Hey, you got a home office? Well, you know, you can deduct that, you know, if you follow. Let me ask you some questions about that, and it does little branches based on your answers to those questions, right? Now here's another example. This is the Intoxilizer 5000EN. This is a device that when you blow into it tells whether you're drunk or not, and therefore should not be driving. So this is a famous case from a few years ago where a guy said, well, if this is the thing that's saying that I'm drunk, I got to see the source code, and he won. You know, because of course the vendor of this device said, well, no, this is a commercial device. The source code is proprietary. I can't share that with you. And the police said, well, but our contract with you said that we have to use your code or be able to swear on a Bible that, you know, this stuff actually works. So in other words, he wanted to open up the hood and examine the witness against him, so to speak, which was the software code that had instantiated in some way, shape, or form the law of whether or not he was drunk or something like that. Here's another example. How many of you have not heard of LegalZoom? 1, 2, 3. See, that's pretty good. I was sitting next to the CEO of LegalZoom at one of these conferences, and he said, we are the most well-known legal brand in the world, 70% name recognition. And so I asked the natural question, who's number 2? And he gave me this name of a law firm, and I said, I've never heard of that law firm. Who are they? And he said, it's the law firm of Ally McBeal. I'm like, oh my God. So LegalZoom is a for-profit entity. You probably, those of you who have seen Bob Shapiro on TV saying, you know, hey, you're starting a business, incorporate, or you want to trademark something. You go to LegalZoom, you fill out a form much looking like TurboTax where you answer questions. It branches based on that. They charge you a little money, give you back a form as a PDF or as a Word file, which you then sign and submit yourself or go find a lawyer to see if what they did was any good, right? We are not your lawyer, right? They recently closed a venture capital round last year for $200 million. Here's in case you just think it's like these fly-by-night internet firms, this is a Safefarth, which is a pretty big law firm, and they have this thing. They have a division called Safefarth Lien, and Disclosure Dragon. I got a demo of this. It's an easy-to-use application that reduces time and cost of preparing legal disclosure documentation. Disclosure Dragon is driven by a detailed series of adaptive questions. Think decision tree here, right? And they generate legal disclosure document. Now, I'm not going to try to explain all this, but long story short, they used to charge $50,000 to produce these documents. Now they'll charge you $10,000 to use their software, which gets about 80% of the documents done, and then you can take it and go get a lawyer, hopefully Safefarth, to complete the process of setting up. I think the deal is it's when you're setting up a situation where you want to crowdsource equity purchases. Think Kickstarter with stocks sort of thing. All right? So they are cannibalizing their own business. They have lawyers sitting around waiting to charge lots of money, but instead they wrote this piece of software that charges one-fifth the cost in the hopes that this will get out in front of all the other law firms out there that they compete with and pull in more business for them. So they're using this as not a loss leader, but as a way to become a leader in this area, right? This is the New York courts, DIY forms. These computer programs ask you questions. The program then, I forgot what the rest of that says, your case or make an information sheet to help you in court. They cover all sorts of things, uncontested divorces, custody visitation, child support. These are things that lawyers don't make too, well, maybe the divorce, but a lot of these things that lawyers don't want this business because there's no money in it. And New York courts sees 80-90% of the people self-representing, and as a result, they expended significant resources to develop online forms so that people can solve these problems themselves. Or at least they show up and they fill out the right form and they fill it out reasonably correct, so they're not standing in front of the judge saying, I don't understand what I'm doing here, and the judge is not allowed to help them. Right? The judge has to be completely nonpartisan in this process and can't say, here, let me show you the right way to do this. That's no-no in the legal system, right? So the reason why I mentioned New York courts is because they used a piece of software called A to J Author, which CALI wrote. And let me tell you a little bit about that. So A to J Author, we started this about 10, 12 years ago. It's software that provides a really friendly interface for people who are usually, for the type of people that are going to be pro se. So English is a second language. They're really scared because they're involving the legal system. They may not have finished high school. It asks them one question at a time. It walks them very slowly. It may have all sorts of things like questions that are not about the legal problem but are about the heuristics of the problem. Like it will front load it with things like, are you here for a parking ticket? Yes, I am actually. Yeah, you're in the wrong place. Go someplace else. So it will front load it with all the questions that prove that you're filling out the wrong form for the wrong reason or something like that, so that it doesn't waste your time. At the end, it sends its data to a document assembly system. You get a PDF or a Word document which you print, sign, and submit to the court. And A to J has been used for things like e-filing, even with the federal courts. It's been used over 2.5 million times in the last 7 years to produce 1.5 million documents. We are as big as LegalZoom. I do not have $200 million. All but the yellow states there have automated some of their forms. There's over 1,000 of these forms that have been automated. I see Texas is under. Thank you. But what the heck does this have to do with legal education? Remember I said CALI was a consortium of law schools? Let me answer that. So we have a project called the A to J Author Course Project, in which we've developed curriculum materials so that law faculty can use A to J Author in a course. And then we hook up the students with legal aid organizations, because there are tens of thousands of forms that need to be automated, and only 1,000 have been automated so far. So we want to scale this thing up. So we get students to learn A to J Author, hook them up with a legal aid organization, and their project is to automate a form. It turns out that figuring out how to automate a legal process teaches you an awful lot about the law. You have to understand really well what you're doing to produce those things. So back to this, law instantiated into software code. Let's look underneath the hood. That's what A to J Author sort of looks like, the authoring system. And as you see, there's various places in A to J Author where people type some code in, if-then statements, and they have to, those if-then statements are based on some aspect of law. So what's the poverty level here? It's 125% of 100,000 or something like that. I'm making it up. I'm not a lawyer, right? So they would type if 100,000, if less than, I should have done the math before I got here. If less than 75,000, then go here, else go there, right? But that's based on some statute or reg or law somewhere out there, and it kind of gets lost. It's disconnected from the code that's in there. What's the site for that information? I think this is going to be a problem, right? So with all these automated forms and all this automated software out there, how do we know that the law that it was based on when it was written is still extant, is still live, right? This is what the decision tree looks like for, I think, Colorado's online intake system. And I didn't even have enough room to make the whole thing fit. There's 300 questions in it. Some of them are means testing. Do you make this, do you make too much money? Are you here for a parking ticket and so on? But an awful lot of these are some sort of legal question or some aspect of a legal question being asked. They should all be documented with what law they come from. So what's the path to a solution here? Well, first of all, I think we need some kind of citation checker like Shepard's or KeyCite, but instead of checking a case for its up-to-dateness, it checks software. Looks at the law that the software is based on. Now that presumes that somebody has documented that software sufficiently, and tells you, this is based on the 1972 statute, and by the way, that's been updated, red flag or something like that. You know, and second, in order to be able to do that, this should be automated, and that means we need open law. We need all of it open, and we need all of it open in a way that you can automatically check it. Something like an api.law.gov. Law.gov goes to the Law Library of Congress. There is no api.law.gov. That's a made-up URL. But it would be awfully nice if I could just say to it, you know, sort of like the way I get weather information or GPS data, which are government data sources. You know, I got some law and I got some date. Tell me whether this is the most recent one, so that I can then run this little report. And it's got to be automated. There can't be a person involved or a phone call or something like that. And as much as possible, it's got to be free, because this is access to the law, right? Now, why do I need that date? Well, as we learned from Barbara, old law can be good law. So it's not just, I don't just need an API to the current law, I need an API to all law, sort of like what GitHub does. Now, if you don't know what GitHub is, I don't have time to explain it, but think of it as like the Wayback Machine on Internet Archive, right? It doesn't just show you your website, it shows you all your website through all the way into the past. Isn't that cool, by the way? I love looking at the old websites and going, oh my God, were we stupid back then? You know? You know, so some sort of essentially version control sort of system for the law, right? Makes total sense. And if you've got a version control system, well, then you can look at current law and old law and do a diff. That's a programmer term for what's the difference. That shows you what was deleted and what was added, right? And so you can quickly evaluate whether that diff has some ramification to that software that I've stuck into the breathalyzer 9000, right? So what do I need? I need some sort of uniform citation system, or API. I need to be able to do automated checks. I need an API to all the law, version control and history system. This is sounding a little scary, right? You know, and I need transparency. And what I mean by that is all these guys had better provide some sort of interface so I can look inside their code and see, you know, what law it's based on. They're not going to do that easily, but otherwise, you know, we can shame them. Now, I'm really worried about this, and so I'm going to start building those sorts of capabilities that I just described into my software, A2J Author. You know, and I'm hoping I can be a leader, or at least an exemplar of what the right way to do this is, because I think this is really important. And this is the best article I found about it. Chicago had a piece of software that predicted whether people were about to commit a crime. They called it the hot list. And there was some question as to whether it was racist or not. Well, let's see the source code. What the heck are they doing there, right? This is the best quote there. If you end up on that list, there's a reason you're there. Doesn't that sound ominous? Man. Now, this article literally just came out yesterday. The Policy Machine, the dangers of letting algorithms make decisions in law enforcement, welfare, and child protection. Couldn't have said it better myself, all right? So open access to the law is really important, really important. I hope I've convinced you of that, and I'm done. Thanks.